Call the meeting in order and welcome everyone to the City of Kalispell's February 12, 2024 work session. We have one item on the agenda this evening, which is the Special Street Maintenance Fund reviews. Mr. Russell, do you want to do an intro? And I think we have a presentation today.
Yeah, Mayor and Council. Very similar to our initial presentation on solid waste, where we're basically looking at a overview of the street fund itself, talk a little bit about, actually talk a lot about the demands that we're seeing, talk about the service levels that we have. Some of the things we'll look at is like, condition and quality of roads. And, as we talk about it, roads are on a life cycle. There's always going to be roads in every different category. And the key is that what is the most optimal intervention point? But then also, what service levels mean, because as we push things off, then they go over a curve and hit down into further deterioration. So we'll go over a lot of those just service levels, and then we'll talk, of course, a little bit about inflation. It's one of those things where we always get the question whenever we're talking about any of our funds, especially as we go into the budget talks of, well, how come, growth isn't keeping up with it? Well, like especially in our service and our assessment funds, where we do rates based on linear feet. You don't grow linear feet with an inflationary component. So it's just not there. It's basically what we're seeing in actual costs as it pertains to it. And we'll talk about some of those. And you've seen how inflation has impacted, 20% higher costs of trucks. Or we're going to hear about, doubling of costs for concrete and asphalt over the past 5 years. So it's just not it's not a growth issue. We're talking an inflationary issue that's really having a big impact on some of the components here. So really, we just wanted to start off the discussion, give that overview, probably come back after, again, similar to the solid waste, after council's had time to digest it, consider it, and then get a little bit more direction from council as we get into recommendations coming forward with the preliminary budget. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to our Director of Public Works, Susie Turner, to go over the presentation materials.
Thank you, Doug. Good evening, Your Honor and council members. Last year, during our budget review, we recognized the net revenue and reserves were declining in such a manner it became evident the financial stability will prompt a fund review for our special street maintenance for this upcoming year. The last time we performed a in-depth analysis of special streets was in 2013, quite a few years ago. And at that time, council adopted an assessment adjustment that was implemented from 2014 to 2018. Tonight, we're going to go through a brief refresher on our services, current assets, followed by a little bit of a deeper dive into our winter operations, pavement preservation, and equipment replacement schedules. Next, we'll shift to some budget overviewing and forecasting, cost of services, revenue requirements, and then finally, hoping to get some good discussion and direction from council to help us proceed with those next steps for the assessment and the budget review. Special Streets Maintenance Fund supports both the Traffic Signs and Signals, or TSS, and Streets Division. Within Public Works, the city's road and fleet superintendent oversees both the Traffic Signs and Signals and Streets Division. The Streets Division is Public Works' largest division and encompasses a street supervisor, an assistant street supervisor, and 11 operators. All of the staff are required to hold CDLs and be skilled at operating a variety of specialty equipment ranging from your tandem axle dump trucks with plows to a paver to a leaf vac to a sweeper and so on. We'll get into a little more details on equipment later. The Traffic Signs and Signals Division is comprised of a TSS supervisor and 2 technicians. All of our TSF staff are also required to hold CDLs and be skilled in operating our specialty equipment, in addition to being certified and knowledgeable in our signage, regulations, street maintenance, regulations and maintenance, our traffic controls, and our streetlight operations. So tonight with me, I have sitting with me Jean Corney, our road and fleet superintendent, and Clint Spears, our street supervisor. If there's something that I can't answer as a part of our operations, I've asked them to come along to kind of help answer some questions that I might not be able to answer. They're really the brains of the division, so I thought I'd bring them along for tonight. The jobs and duties, the jobs and services provided by each division are essential for the community, however varied as different seasons come and go. Since it's winter, we're going to start there. Street operations responsibilities include all aspects of our winter operations, so snow plowing, hauling, winter de-icing, and sanding. We're going to deep dive into winter operations in a couple more slides, so we're going to leave it at that. After kind of our winter operations, we move right into our pothole season. It's kind of our shoulder seasons, if you will, in the spring and fall. We did purchase an asphalt reclaimer, so we're able to repair those potholes during those shoulder seasons when the asphalt plants are down. So that's a really good piece of equipment for us that we recently purchased. From there, in the springtime, we have 4 sweepers that are out in full force starting in the spring to sweep away, if you will, the winter weathered. And then we move into just our regular street sweepings throughout the construction and summer season. We try to sweep the town at least 3 times throughout the summer, and then we go back into the fall and we start sweeping heavily again, and that kind of melds into our leaf collection season. We are responsible for the vegetation mowing and trimming in the road right away when it comes to our ditches in those areas. We also have a couple gravel roads still in our system, so we're responsible to make sure we grade those roads. Swinging back to sweepings that we collect are actually a regulated waste. So as a part of our sweepings program, we have to hold that material and sample them before we can dispose of them as clean waste. So there's a whole program that goes with our street sweepings as a part of managing that waste, those materials. Shifting into our summer construction, we focus primarily on pavement preservation and replacement. So we perform milling, reconstruction, paving, crack sealing, ADA improvements, and utility patching throughout from the spring, once the weather is good, all the way to the fall until it snows. We do dabble a little bit in sidewalk maintenance where the necessity arises. So we'll dabble in some sidewalk maintenance as a part of that. And then we also do manhole collars. We have a Mr. Manhole where we can replace heaved or deteriorated concrete collars around manholes. And we also install new collars on our new pavement jobs to kind of protect our manholes once we get done paving a job. So that kind of summarizes our street maintenance. We shift over to our traffic signs and signals. Yes?
And the sweeping, I mean, that has a lot to do with air quality and water. I mean, because of storm water, the runoff.
Yep, sweepings kind of, we kind of get, sweepings also is a component of our stormwater permit, right? So we're required to do good housekeeping measures throughout the city and collecting dirt and debris from the roads, urban living, if you will, right? And we collect that and store that and dispose of it in the proper manner. So yeah, we do get credit on our MS4 permit for street sweepings also. A big part of that. When we move into the equipment maintenance, you'll see we have 4 sweepers, and the cost of those sweepers are split between streets and storm. Yeah, yep. Any other questions on streets? So shifting over to traffic signs and signals. We are responsible for all the traffic controls throughout the city, traffic and regulatory signs, traffic counts. We collect data for traffic counts that we provide to our engineers to do our traffic studies. All that is done in our TSS division. They're responsible for our signals maintenance. our traffic and pedestrian signals, our cabinet operations, which are pretty much all computerized at this point. The electronics within a cabinet is quite sophisticated, and our technicians are trained to be able to operate and maintain those. We have pretty sophisticated intersection detections systems that are also under the umbrella of responsibility for our TSS. This division is also responsible for our luminaires, our decorative lights, and in the summertime, they perform our pavement markings refreshing. So they do all of our long lines, symbols, crosswalks, curb painting, and parking stalls. So they're pretty busy throughout the summer just with that alone. Actually, one little tidbit I was going to add. I think during street maintenance, I didn't really talk very much about leaf collection. Leaf collection is one of our major tasks that we perform. That usually happens around starting in October. We get a good month and a half to collect all the leaves that fall. This last fall, we collected, I think, I'm trying to find the number, 3,975 cubic yards of leaves were collected. That's equivalent to 331 12-yard dump truck loads of leaves that we collected this past fall. So pretty significant. And you know, that number just kind of keeps rising as we keep growing. So something to keep in mind is the more trees we plant, the more leaves we get to collect as a part of that. And, you know, as subdivisions come in, the trees are, they're not quite mature, but in as you get like a 5-year-old subdivision, your trees are starting to mature and your leaves are, it starts to accumulate a lot more. So while they're,
Start with trees that big.
yeah, they grow. It happens.
So do we just collect those loose, or do we have a baler, or?
We actually collect them we have actually several ways that we collect them. We ask our residents to sweep the leaves at least, I think, 2 feet away from the curb line in rows. And then depending on the exact area, we'll use the leaf vac, the new piece of equipment that we got. So we'll use the leaf vac to go out and suck up the piles. We also have 2 leaf grabbers on our, are they on the loader?
Yep, front
On
end
the
loader.
front end loader, so we'll grab them and put them into the dump truck. Or we also repurpose one of the rear loaders so we can get it into a rear loader, which can smash them so we can put more volume of leaves in the back of a rear loader as we do it. We also send our street sweepers down to kind of collect up, because leaves are fluffy and they drop and they break up. So we'll send our sweepers to collect some of the smaller debris. But then also some of our sweepers have vacuum hoses in the back too, so we can walk behind and do vacuum sweeping in that manner also. But the leaf vac was a tremendous help for us last fall. It improved our efficiencies in the outlining areas, and we were able just to collect more. So it was a great piece of equipment for us. And this was the first fall that we got to use that piece of equipment. So it was great. You guys like that? Yeah.
And then do you just take it up to the dump?
No, we actually compost all of our leaves. So all of our leaves are stored in row piles back behind the wastewater treatment plant. There's large rows of leaves that are composting. Once we dump it, we turn it every now and then, but we actually transition that responsibility over to Parks and Rec to do the composting for the leaves now. Yeah, we're licensed through the state for leaf composting.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's free to the public. Good advertisement. It's free to the public. And it's really good compost at the end as it's broken down.
Counselor Dahlman has a question.
Okay.
Hey, I'd like to second that. I have gone to those leaf piles on multiple occasions and put that in my garden. So it's right over there behind the water treatment plant. Just go help yourself. It's great stuff.
Well, actually, we love you to call in to to Parks and Rec and
Okay,
schedule
good.
a time, and
Perfect.
we'll load you up. But
Yeah, my liability perked up, like, wait a minute.
So, but we'd love to have you call in and we'll load you up.
Sorry about that. Sorry. I apologize.
Any other questions on services we provide or anything? Yeah, did I get them all? Covered it? All right. Okay. So moving on, as areas of Kalispell get developed and the street and traffic infrastructure is turned over, if you will, to Public Works to maintain, operate, and service for the residents and businesses who rely on those assets, as the city expands, so do the responsibilities of our divisions. To sustain our current service levels, we must acquire additional equipment and employ personnel to efficiently handle our essential tasks. As we perform forecasting for cost of services, we do take into consideration our recent growth for the short term, our actually current growth, and then our short term expectations. Since 2019, we've acquired 7 new miles of infrastructure. That's approximately 1.4 miles per year. The roads are spread out, are spread throughout Kalispell, but primarily in the west and northern areas. With the newly added roads, not including the anticipated new infrastructure of 10 miles that are stuck there in preliminary plat but are coming on sooner than later. We are once again bumping up against our limits to perform our current levels of services. When we take a look at our asset numbers, they're quite impressive. We maintain 166 miles of road. When you break that down, that's 142 miles of streets and 23 miles of alleys. Over 2,000 combined street lights. So that includes our flathead electric lights and our city-owned maintained lights. Over 5,000 signs we're responsible to maintain and replace and keep up to date. We're also responsible for 10 traffic signals. Now, since I've started as the Public Works Director, that number hasn't grown. I anticipate it to grow someday when the traffic triggers it to grow. What has changed with our traffic signals is the components, the operating systems have significantly changed and upgraded to new technology. So that part of the traffic signals has changed. We've also got a lot of feedback and flashing signals at crosswalks, if you will, that and actuated pedestrian crossings. We've seen an uptick in those being installed throughout Kalispell. And just off the top of my head, I counted 16. I didn't go out and like count them all, but at least 16 of them are in Kalispell, and those require maintenance. They're great, and they work fantastic, but there's a lot of maintenance that goes along with those feedback signs. Is there any questions on growth and where we're going? A lot of this I know council kind of sees walking through, but just some of the things that we consider as we're doing our forecasting, and you'll see that in our budgets here coming up. Okay. 2 of our services, including winter operations and pavement preservations, they deserve a little more in-depth description. And since it's wintertime, that's where we're going to start. We shift from leaf collection to winter operations, typically in late October, and continue through March. Our normal daily operations start at 4 a.m. with 2 operators and include plowing, sanding, or de-icing emergency routes every morning with either de-icers and underbody plows or plows and sanders to prepare the road system for the buses and morning commuters. So when we have 2 operators come in the morning, they contact our dispatch and KPD and ask where the areas are where complaints came in through the night. And then we go out and hit those areas, and then we sand or de-ice the emergency routes. The emergency routes, they're shown on the illustration in dark red. And we go through those every year before the winter season to make sure we've got the right routes recognized and being addressed through the winter season. So if we shift back to during a snow day, as the other crews start their day, they head out to their routes to complete the plowing operations. When we have a snow event, which is 3 inches or more, crews are called on to plow their routes. To date, we have 11 designated routes and 78 cul-de-sacs. The 12 and 6 yard plow trucks service the outer subdivisions, everything not within the downtown area, pretty much. And the downtown areas are serviced by graders. We have 2 graders, and they're followed by V-plows. So let me get my pointer. Graders and V-plows are in this area. Sorry for my clumsiness. The graders have the gates, so they kind of help us control where the snow goes. And then the plow trucks are out in these other areas for those routes on that. Okay. So after we do that first flush of plowing, we'll clean up the route areas. We'll pull to the centers and haul and berm. Oh, how many? We have 7 miles of berm and hauls throughout the city of Kalispell, and those are areas that don't have boulevards. So we have to pull it to the center, and then we haul those, and then we have 7 miles worth of those. So we'll do that. We'll berm and haul, and typically we can get through the entire city in 24 hours, and then we come back to the berm and haul areas and get everything hauled within 3 days. It's kind of our goal and what we're set up to do. However, that time frame will vary with the amount of snow we get. This last snow event that we got 12 inches, that was pretty significant snow event. It took us a week to haul all the bermed areas and get the town cleaned up. So just took us a little bit longer because we got a significant amount of snow. So it really, 3 inches of snow, we got it cleaned up in 3 days. You start piling 6-inch event on top of a 6-inch event, it just takes us a little bit longer to get out there to those. When we are working through those snow events, we also have 3 de-icer trucks with underbody plows. I don't think a lot of people recognize, but one of the things that helps us get done in those 3 days is we actually have those underbody plows go in front of our large plow trucks. They plow the centers, and then the tandem axle plow trucks or the single axle plow trucks will come behind and push it and clear out the roads. And that allows us to do things a little bit faster and get through certain areas. So those underbody trucks are actually really important to our operations. The cul-de-sacs, so we will always hit the cul-de-sacs the first go around, and then we come back with pickup plows and clean out the cul-de-sacs. Cul-de-sacs are extremely difficult to plow, and because you have a lot of driveways and a little bit of boulevard, and they're a challenge area for us on there, and we have a lot of them. Alleys are also they're kind of our secondary priority, but we do get to them. We focus on the day the event happened and when we're picking up solid waste. So we're trying to get in front of our solid waste trucks. We also have some pickup plows in our solid waste division that helps with that, but eventually we have to come in and plow out those alleys. There's no room in the alleys to push no to, so you pretty much push it out to the road and then we pick it up, is primarily what we do with our alleys. Very challenging for us, alleys are, but we've been doing it for years, and that's just how we get it done. Our snow storage, we have 4 locations where we store our snow. We store snow behind the city's shop complex, the treatment plant, the parking lot on 8th and Airport Way, and then there's a spot up north of town off of Parkway Drive. It's up off of Stillwater. There's a dead-end street right into the bypass. We plow snow there, and we dump it there because it's not really a street used for anything else. It's kind of a dead end, and it has a great ditch and drainage area for us for the snow to melt into. So we capitalize on that area that really got cut off when the bypass got constructed. All right, so as far as our plowing operations, we have to give credit and appreciation to our tireless crew that work long hours to ensure roads are passable during and after events. Or during that last event when we had a lot of drifting happening, a lot of snow, we had operators that were working till midnight to keep Silverbrook open, several nights in a row. We had operators coming in at 2:30 in the morning to keep 4 Mile Drive from blowing in so we could get morning commuters and buses to where they need to go. We had plow trucks in front of school buses getting them home. And so our crew worked tirelessly through these events. So it's good to show our appreciation to our crews when they work so hard. We also don't function without our equipment. So our mechanics worked during weekends and holidays to make sure our equipment was up and running for us during these times too. So you got to give kudos to our mechanics, which are fantastic during these operations. Okay, so our challenge areas with winter operations have to do with the drifts that we are seeing as we move into the western and northern areas of town. There's just a lot of prevailing winds that come through. We see a lot of wind drifts. Fortunately, we've acquired some good pieces of equipment that help us deal with those wind drifts as they're coming through. So we are set up better now to be able to deal with those, but they're still there. And we're working through those. Narrow roads and dense subdivisions, like it or not, when we have narrow roads and dense subdivisions, frustrations happen in the neighborhoods because of that, especially when we don't have properly sized boulevards. So boulevards are our champions. We love boulevards, and they really reduce the stress among the whole community when we have a place to put our snow. So we're champions for boulevards. I'm trying to get my pointer away so I can scroll here. Okay. We already talked about alleys. Where do you put the snow? Route growth. So the 11th route was actually added this winter season because of our growth. So right now we are actually short personnel and equipment to support that route. So you'll see in the upcoming budget, I'm going to request another full-time street operator and a piece of equipment so we can fill in the void that we had there. We utilized a loader to kind of fill in the gap for last season, but that loader really has other needs during our snowplow season, but we just shifted and made it work for this year, and continuing into this year. So you'll see that as we work through other things. One of the other, we don't have any backup for our equipment if they fail. I just reviewed, currently if something goes down, we shift a loader in to take that place. If it's a major equipment failure, we're down. We're just down a piece of equipment. In today's world, when you have major mechanical failures, you just don't get stuff up and running right away if you're ordering something in to fix that piece of equipment. So reliable equipment is really important for us to provide our services. Are there any questions with our winter operations?
On those areas that drift a lot, is there any discussion with some of the property owners, larger property owners that are near those roads that could put up snow fences to try to not eliminate but reduce some of that?
You know, I've never had those conversations to date. I actually, in some discussions with Jared Nygren, in recognizing that as Starling is coming in, they had that entire Section 36 blow across that subdivision. So we were actually thinking about approaching them for the next winter season to see maybe if we could do something in that area. There was significant amount of snow that blew through the Starling area up in here. Because like I said, this whole field at one time was drifting that way. So just kind of growing pains through areas as things build out. It's not quite as prevalent, but kind of like Silverbrook too. We had, like 4 years ago, we had wind drifts that were 20 feet high when there wasn't any houses or buildings in the area. That's reduced a little bit. We still have a lot of drifting up there, but it's kind of just when you have a vacant field, it's going to blow in. So I haven't approached anybody. Have you guys? No. Yeah, but that would be the only real major one I could think of where we could benefit is right in there. Okay, moving on. As I said, we need to do a little bit deeper dive into our winter operations and our pavement preservation operations. Currently, we have 142 miles of roads, 23 miles of alleys. The standard life for asphalt roadway is 25 to 30 years with preventative maintenance. And that's according to the Asphalt Institute and anybody who's ever managed roads. However, your standard life of a road can vary based off of factors like your traffic volumes, the size and the weight of traffic that's traveling on your roads, your road base, how it was constructed. In the downtown areas where we paved over clay, those ones don't last as long, and we have to reconstruct them. Weather conditions really road conditions are really dependent on your weather conditions when you have freeze thaw, especially when your drainage isn't sufficient. Very similar to some of our downtown areas. When you don't have great drainage, your roads are going to break up, especially during your freeze thaw times of the year. So road drainage is really important. And just the age of the road and how that road was constructed. When we have 30-year-old roads, it's time for us, the life of that road is expired, and it's time for us to reconstruct it and put some monies into it to bring it back to a good road. Preventative maintenance is very important to extend the life of a road. In this figure, it helps illustrate the goals of preventative maintenance. The pavement curve represents a roadway's typical design life. There is a 40% decrease in the quality occurring over the first 75% of a road's design life. The second 40% decrease in quality happens in a much faster time frame. The strategy is to perform preventive maintenance on a roadway when it's in good to fair condition, rather than waiting until the road gets to the really poor quality, and then at what time we would have to do a reconstruction project, which is more costly for the city in the long run. So maintenance efforts that can extend the life of asphalt and roadway surfaces includes your mill and overlays, your chip seals, your crack seals, and your slurry seals. However, even with preventative maintenance, asphalt has a life and is going to need to be replaced. Annually, we perform conditional assessments that rate the condition of the road. The annual ratings provide an overall picture of the conditional status of our road network and is used to determine the upcoming year's pavement preservation projects. The roads are ranked and categorized as very poor, fair, good, and very good roads. So, if you're wondering how our roads rate, one second, I need to take a drink. We've got 14 miles of very poor roads, 22 miles of poor roads, 31 miles of fair roads, 33 miles of good roads, and 40 miles of excellent roads. So, what do? We go out, Gene will go out and he will rate the roads every fall. with the support of his streets crew. They go out and they rate the roads. We put that into our GIS system, and this is what the map looks like. Now you'll see that as we start rating those roads, it's rated block by block. So not all blocks are poor or very poor. So you got some very poor next to some good roads. So it's kind of patchworky through the areas. Well, that was back. Sorry about that. I just got a zoomed in one there. So there's kind of a zoomed in area for us to kind of look at. So in the upcoming years, we're going to focus on 3rd Avenue East through here. 3rd Avenue East and 3rd Street East. Last year, we tried to redo 3rd Street East, and as we got to the project, we recognized that we needed to do drainage improvements and reconstruction improvements and ADA improvements, and we needed to drain it to 3rd Street East. And we had a CIP water line replacement down 4th Avenue East, so we started combining projects. So you're going to see some major street work through 3rd Avenue and 3rd Street East coming up here in the next couple years. We're going to focus in on Center Street and get the rest of Center Street down to 5th Ave. Milled and overlaid to improve that road. We're going to focus, I got to go back. We're going to focus in on some of the South Meadows area again, down in here, get some of that improved in the upcoming years. Meridian Court, we got to redo Meridian Court over here. So we'll be, like I said, we'll be focusing in on some of these, but this is kind of just to give you an overview of what our street system looks like and its conditional assessment and what categories are in.
You know, the very poor can go anywhere from mill and overlay to a rebuild.
Yeah, pretty much. If it's very poor, typically what we're looking at is complete asphalt replacement. So we're ripping up the 4 inches or 6 inches or 8 inches of asphalt and we're redoing the road. And then it really depends on what the subbase looks like and the drainage. So we'll take a look at that also, and we'll either take it block by block or we'll have to make a larger CIP, if you will, and save monies in a line item year to year. Which is a great question and a great lead in to the next slide. We have different treatments which are applied to the road for preservation or reconstruction, and the treatments are applied to different road rated categories. For example, a 2-inch mill and overlay and chip seal are typically performed on fair and good roads in order to prolong the life of that road. A 4-inch asphalt removals and paving and or city reconstruction and or contractor reconstruction are typically performed on poor to very poor roads. Once a treatment is applied, it'll bring that rating of that road back up to good or very good. Treatment costs are variable and dependent on that road's conditions. I would really like to provide a straightforward, uniform cost to perform pavement preservation treatments for road rating categories, but in reality, those costs are highly dependent on the road's condition, their subbase, the drainage, the curb and gutter, and ADA. So ADA requirements, if we perform a mill and overlay, a reconstruction, or anything near an intersection that requires us to do ADA upgrades, we are required to do that as a part of that project. So it's not a should we do ADA, it's we have to do ADA because of the law. So those really add costs to projects. Just for an intersection, it could be up to $15,000 per intersection going forward. So.
Councilor Dahlman has a question.
Yeah, what condition was 8th Avenue in when that was done last year? What?
It was, I'd have to go back and look specifically, but I'm going to say it was at least a very poor road through the majority of those sections through that area.
Because you guys did drainage too, didn't you?
We did. Yep. We did that as a complete project with the water line. Usually when we're going in and doing water replacements, we're cutting into the curb. So you have to replace the curb line because you're bringing across service lines. throughout the entire block. So,
Well, there was no curb, so
yeah, yep, and we added in some of that to improve the drainage through those areas.
okay, that just kind of gives me an idea of what like a road looks like. And then that picture that we just saw, that's a poor road, yes?
Oh,
That one, yeah.
that's a very poor road.
This is one of our gravel roads that we grade.
It's a very poor road. Yeah, yeah,
Okay, just clarifying.
yeah.
Thanks.
Very poor. Yeah.
And Susie, looking at the very poor, I mean, like this, I can tell you that there's maybe 6 inches of base on this when it was, I mean, at best.
I don't think there was any base on that. It was
Anything.
pumping. It was
I
clay,
mean-
right? We were on clay for that. Yeah, there was nothing.
So you
under
look
that,
back at the age of the road system and you go back, they didn't have the ability to really do the work back then like we do with
Currently,
geotech
yeah.
fabrics and all those other things to create those baffles so we don't have
Right.
bendy
Yep.
roads underneath, so.
What road is this, Susie?
It's 10th Street West. So oh, sorry. 10th Street East. Yeah. So what we have provided in the table are the 2023 costs for treatment categories. For reference, I color coded the treatments typically performed on the categories for each ranked roads. That's kind of like if you looked at the chip seal row, chip seal is primarily performed on roads that are rated fair or good. So we're trying to prolong the life of that road with preventative maintenance. If your road is rated at very poor to poor, that's when we're doing the city reconstruction or the 4-inch asphalt removal and overlays. As we get into the annual budgeting process, we are going to take our yearly allocated funding and add our carryovers from the previous year for a total funding amount. We then select our priority road segments and perform cost estimates for those necessary treatments. And then finally, we determine the number of projects we can complete based off of our budgets for that year. Prioritization of projects include reviewing the road conditions, continuity, street networks, coordination with other utility CIPs, and funding. So by December of every year, we have an initial list created of projects, and then we start working through the budget and start the scheduling process. So we have a big list, and then we get a cost estimate, and then we see how much we have in our budget and what projects we're going to be doing. By March, we have a really well-developed plan, and then spring hits, and all bets are off because we have a blowout that shifts our priority as shown in this picture, which is 10th Street East. It blew out in the springtime, and for that year, we had to do a complete readjustment on our projects because we had to reconstruct this entire block. So our street CIP is dynamic, and even our best prepared plans may actually fall apart literally. And so that's why we have a pretty extensive list created each winter, which gives us options to be flexible in order to meet our funding limit. So I always hesitate. I send out a list in the spring saying, okay, these are the roads we're going to be doing. And then inevitably it kind of changes throughout the year just based off of circumstances. So. All right, now that we've reviewed our rating and project prioritization process, we can look deeper into the budgets and the funds. With streets, we cross over fiscal years with funding because we have a really short paving season, which is 3/4 of the way done by the time we get our budgets adopted in August. So in a lot of times, we're looking at things fiscally wise and calendar wise. So if you wouldn't mind focusing on the left column of information provided under Program 2023. I'm going to get my pointer up here again. Okay. So what we're looking at are revenues that we had coming in for 2023. And when I say Program 2023, I'm talking calendar year now. So we had $1.1 million worth of BARSA funding, $150,000 for gas tax, and $450,000 allocated from your street maintenance fund, which that was established when we did the assessment review back in 2013. We actually established allocations for pavement preservation. So then if we want to shift down to our expenditures, you'll see in this column, this is what we planned on doing in 2023. We always have a debt payment that goes towards our 4th Avenue East reconstruction project. So for 20 years, we're going to have a debt payment of $39,000 for that road, which was a great project. And that was in coordination with a water project also. We planned on spending about $410,000 in mill and overlay. We ended up spending $371,000. We did not perform any chip seals last year, and that was because of costs. The contractor, because our projects were kind of on the small end, they weren't typically interested in coming here and doing our work. So we're kind of running into that a little bit. But the cost increase have raised significantly for chip seal, and you'll see that in the next couple slides. We did do a city reconstruction project there by Elrod, which ended up being about $63,000. And then the majority of our funding went to 8th Avenue West for that reconstruction project. Now, if we look down to the next table, you can kind of see our percentages and proportions. For our very poor to poor roads, we improved 3.1% of them. But in doing that, we utilized 77% of our funding. For our fair to good roads, we improved 2.4% of those, and we utilized the remainder 23% of our funding to do that. Sorry, I don't remember if I mentioned the BARSA funding here. That's 2 years of allocation. So we actually had monies allocated in 2022. We saved that to apply to 8th, and then we took the 2023 and added those together to put that to 8th Avenue West. Okay, so now if we shift to the right column of information under Program 2024, so now we're kind of going through what revenues we have for construction year 2024. We've got our BARSA funding, our gas tax. We always allocate money from gas tax, and typically we try to apply that for chip seals, and then our $450,000 from Special Streets Fund. So we go into what we anticipate we're going to do this year. Again, we've got that bond payment, the remainder of the $450, $410. We're hoping to put towards mill and overlay projects. Hoping to do some chip seal this year. Want to do about $300,000 worth of city reconstruction projects. And then the remainder of that is going to go towards 3rd Avenue East. So we do have about $600,000 left in BARSA that we're going to transfer over to help this. So it looks like we're going to spend more than we have, but that's because, again, I'm crossing over budgets and fiscal years, so it kind of looks a little wonky, but what you don't see is our carryover from this year going into that. So if we were to spend this amount of funding, if we shift down to the next table, you'll see that we will be able to improve 4.3% of our poor to very poor roads at about 60% of our funding. And then we will be able to improve 5.1% of our fair to good roads at 40% of our funding.
Susie,
Yep.
could you remind me, please, where the BARSA money comes from, or what is that?
It's a statewide gas tax that was put in
Okay.
place about 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay. And so the difference between the 2 years is, did you say that was a carryover?
Yeah. So BARSA kind of changed with legislation too. So like Doug said, it's very similar to the gas tax. It was actually the first year I think it was instituted was in 2018 is when it came in. Because that's when we did our first project down at Glacier Village Greens, and we were super thankful for it. So it used to get distributed once a year in March, but with last year's legislation, they changed that. So now we get monthly stipends that come in just like gas tax does. So it looks really similar to gas tax.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I just forgot where that was coming
No,
from.
so that's why we have kind of an extra amount that came in 2023 that we would have normally got in 2024. It's just kind of, so the way the funding laid out in the last, from 23 to 24.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the city will never run out of pavement preservation projects. And the more roads we can maintain in the fair and good stage, the longer we can extend the life of our roads and recognize some cost savings. When we look at our current program up here, you'll see very similar to what we went through for the program 2024. But this is really what we're aiming for on a normal year. We bring in about $1.2 million worth of funding to put towards pavement preservation. And this is the anticipated breakdown that we try to achieve. Now, if you remember, we're going to put a majority of our BARSA funding now towards 3rd Avenue East. It's going to take us about 5 years to do all of 3rd Avenue East. We're going to break it up in phases. So the majority of that money is going to go to that project now for the next several years. But if you want to look at our proportions and percentages, what we can accomplish about improving about 2.2% of our poor to very poor roads and about 5.1% of our fair to good roads. So that's where we're at right now with our program. In looking at future program options, if we were to allocate $900,000 from the Special Streets Fund towards our pavement preservation program, it obviously increases the amount of improved roads that we can accomplish during each year. So it would raise then our improvements of our very poor to poor roads to 4.3% and our fair to good roads to 7%. And that's doing a 50-50 cost split, which never happens in reality because projects aren't that perfect. So, there's always some shifting on projects depending on what projects we just decide to do that year. But that's kind of where we'd be if we doubled the amount of allocations from the Special Streets Fund for that. Now, as I've been presenting, we've been reviewing our pavement funding and projects. We've really only been looking at a one-dimensional snapshot in time of revenues versus expenditures. What we haven't discussed is the inflationary costs that we've seen since 2018. Really, that inflationary cost has reduced the number of projects we are able to complete each year. Just for a quick comparison, if you will, I took our bids. So every year we receive bids for projects on our chip seal, asphalt, contract milling and paving and reconstruction. And if you'll take a look at the center column graphs, you'll see the annual increases that have happened on those. And then this last column takes into consideration the cost increase from 2018 to 2023. So really, we're seeing some pretty significant cost inflations from 2018. Really, some of the big ones, our asphalt costs have raised 58% since 2018. And really, we haven't had any adjustment to kind of absorb that increase. Our contract paving has increased 64%. It's really reduced the opportunity for us to bring in a contractor to support our paving. However, we've improved our own paving operation, so we've kind of been able to do cost savings on our own just by improving our own pavement practices, which I think is very beneficial for the fund in itself. And something that we've just grown and kind of have increased really our capabilities through that. What I did on these two outside columns was give a comparison of our 2018 costs versus our 2023 costs. And you can see that if we were to go back to the project that we did in 2018, there's a 81% increase in that project if we were to do that in today's dollars. So we wouldn't be able to do this. Actually, what we would do is we would chop it into smaller blocks and make it fit, make the budget fit with what we have coming in. So that kind of summarizes my pavement preservation review. Is there any questions on pavement preservation program?
Does this count as shrinkflation?
Shrinkflation.
Sorry, couldn't resist. The chief economist of the country is killing me.
Well, I guess I would just say I have a very good friend that has built probably most of the parking lots and many of the roads in the community. And every time I go to lunch, he always comments about how great job that the city of Kalispell staff does with their roads. He just sings the praises every time. So you guys doing a good job.
Yeah, I would add on, our staff has really taken ownership to doing a fantastic job, and we've provided training, and the equipment just helps us do a great job and provide a great product at the end. So we've learned a lot over the last 5 years, and you can definitely see it. Yep.
So if you look back, Silverbrook, the main road through Silverbrook was 2007,
Oh,
in
I
that
bet
time
so.
frame. So if you look at the condition of that road, let's say over 15 years, granted more use, compare that to a similar traveled road that is way older constructed. I mean, how's that holding up? I mean, it's proving out that the better construction methodologies, these things last a lot longer.
Well, absolutely. When you have better subbase and you have that structure underneath, you're definitely going to have a road system that's going to last a little longer. Silverbrook, I don't know if it's the best example, but other areas, Silverbrook just had some challenges with the type of soil types it had in general, because it's a very sandy area up in there.
Okay.
We've improved even our city standards just based on that first construction for that. Because of the type of geology that is out there at Silverbrook. But to your point, yes, as we come to our updated standards, your roads are going to be able to last a little bit longer because of that. Or, hopefully we can span those 15 years without putting a lot of money into them. The other thing that I think is improved is the drainage. When you can sheet the flow off the road and get it to drain to an inlet, you're not having water ponding and sitting and breaking up the road. So drainage is a huge part of your asphalt life.
Right. So a lot of these older subdivisions, I mean, we're going back having to redo work that just, it was the standard at the time, but it got by.
It did, yeah.
And so as you look at these cost increases and go, okay, so 2018 to today, to 2023, have a developer putting in a new subdivision, we don't pay that, they pay for this, and they're seeing the same types of cost increases.
Yep.
So as we look at that, that transfers over to the price of land. Pay me now, pay me later, guess what, you're gonna pay me for this road. And what's startling though is when you look at the, on this, what is it? I used to live here.
A what?
Up behind Edgerton,
Up behind Edgerton, on,
Brewer Lane, and
in that.
Yeah,
in that-
Buffalo Stage
Buffalo
Road.
Stage,
Yeah,
Stage,
Buffalo
thank you.
Stage
I
area,
mean,
yeah.
Reserve scarred me forever trying to turn left. I'd lost brain cells waiting at that light for years. You look at these numbers and we'd be able to do half.
Half, yeah.
And I remember when that was done, it was a significant project.
It
So-
was, yeah, and it was great, and yeah, yep.
And on chip seal, what is, I mean, we don't have the competition. Is that part of the issue with costs?
Well,
Or that's too
I think the
much?
material costs really increased it. I think it's like $4.50 a square yard now for chip seal, where it used to be like $2. I'd have to go back.
225.
$2.25.
Yeah.
I mean, I think just the material costs have increased, but then you start adding, the cost of their equipment, the cost of their fuel, so that type of stuff. So once you do that, you bring in all that, it's just, it doesn't pay off to 3 miles of chip seal in a small city, right? They want to go for bigger cities and bigger lineages. So it's just it's hard for them to price out coming and doing small jobs anymore.
Do we have anyone local that's still, we used to have someone.
Oh, yeah,
I
they're
think
still
there's a
local,
couple,
right?
but
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
they
I
go
think-
everywhere.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. I think that was actually one of our benefits is they like coming here and being here around the 4th of July. So
There you go,
that's not a bad thing. We'll use it.
which is a good time to chip seal.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Another large aspect of our Special Streets Fund is our equipment replacement program. In order for us to perform the required tasks, operations, and services, our departments require working equipment that are reliable and multifunctional. And multifunctional, we like to be able to use our piece of equipment throughout the entire year. So we aim, that's kind of one of our goals, that we don't have a piece of equipment just sitting to sit type of deal. So streets and traffic signs and signals have more pieces of equipment than any other division in the city. We have 46 pieces of rolling stock, trailers, and large equipment, in addition to 35 attachments, which are your plows, your leaf grabbers, your V-loader plows, sanders, skidster attachments. So needless to say, equipment is a very important part of the Special Streets Fund. When our equipment is out of commission due to repairs, our abilities to perform efficiently and effectively is definitely compromised. Therefore, it's really important for us to adhere to our regular replacement schedules, just to ensure we can operate optimally throughout and be able to provide our services. So we have a lot of fleet, and really what I wanted to do is just give a quick run through of our major equipment. So I'm not going to talk about each piece. You can kind of see, I have a picture of our major pieces, the number of pieces we have for each one of those. And then what I did in the blue boxes was show the multifunctional uses of our pieces of equipment. Because as I stated before, it doesn't make sense for us to buy a piece of equipment and sit it for a majority of the year. Although sometimes it's unavoidable, like our leaf vac trailer, that's specifically for leaf collection. But it's been a fantastic piece of equipment for us. And our snow blower, can't really do anything else with that but blow snow. So some of it we can't cross over and get it to use, but we do for our large dump trucks. We're using those consistently throughout the entire year. Our graders, we're using those throughout the year. Our front end loaders is one of our major pieces of equipment. We're using that on a daily basis. So big pieces of equipment, really important to have. Working on the second page of equipment, we've got asphalt zipper, our asphalt patcher, our asphalt reclaimer, if you will. We've got a paint truck, which has our equipment on the back of it, and that paint truck does all of our pavement striping throughout the summer. A big boom truck that services all of our traffic signals, a water truck with the underbody plows, rollers, sweepers, 4 sweepers right now in our fleet, and then just pickup trucks. We need pickup trucks to be able to provide our services. So we have multiple pickup trucks throughout in this division to help provide our services.
A pickup truck looks like it's almost ready to go to the Parks Department.
Well,
I wish Chad was here to hear this, but
yeah,
and I guess the
that's
other,
Clint's pickup.
it's a lovely truck. But I think the other side of this is, in the past, we've had pieces of equipment that normally are at the end of their life cycle, but we're able to keep things lasting a lot longer. And we're still doing that through the efforts of the shop. And I think that's to be commended. I mean, not
Yeah.
having to replace $500,000 pieces of equipment or.
We do our best with what we got. So yeah, we have some fantastic and skilled mechanics that keep us up and going, but that really lasts for so long.
Right.
So we do have to make sure that we have reliable equipment.
Have you looked at any lease programs for the larger equipment like graders and does it pencil out?
It doesn't pencil out for us to do that. So we did the last time we purchased a grader, we looked at that alternative, and it really didn't pencil out. There was really no cost savings for us. You would hope that the lease agreements would give you some cost
Right.
savings, but it really didn't. And it was a really difficult. You pretty much own the piece of equipment if you damage it whatsoever. You're paying for it. So, which is understandable, right? You know, the person that's leasing it to you, they want that piece of equipment to be able to be leased to somebody else. So I get it. Okay. I never asked, was there any other questions on equipment? If none, we're moving right into the next part of our review, which is our budget overview and forecasting. Our revenues for our special streets and traffic signs and signals come from our street assessment, gas tax, and BARSA. So that's where our revenues come from. And you can kind of see the BARSA and gas tax, where those came into the pavement preservation. But what you don't see is gas tax also helps support a lot of our other street operations. So portions of gas tax, we actually allocate as half of the gas and oil costs for special streets. So like $100,000 come out of gas tax to support our gas consumption for special streets funds. So you won't see this in this presentation because we're looking at special streets funds, but gas tax does support quite a bit of our operations. Gas tax, as it comes in, it really is quite stable. We don't see a lot of change in our gas tax as it's coming in. We won't see a lot of change now in BARSA either, because the increases for BARSA have stopped. So that's going to pretty much level out from here on. As we get roads added onto our system, really minor increases annually come into gas tax and BARSA. So you just don't see a lot of change in those revenues coming in. So our expenditures, kind of just to summarize, and these match up with a lot of our line items in our budgets. So we have salaries, maintenance and operations, fleet and equipment, facility additions are going to come in as capital projects, traffic signs, signals, and controls materials. One of our costs, pavement preservation program, which we kind of reviewed there. And then we have debt. We have debt on some large pieces of equipment right now for our loaders, and then just large capital projects like 4th Avenue East. As a part of our budget overview, we always ensure we have 50% of our operating expenditures as our ending cash, or another word for it is our reserves. So it's kind of like our trigger when we're looking as to when we need to come in front of council. So this was part of our trigger and review. And on our last sheet, I'll go through where we're at on that.
Susie, did you have something on the equipment inflation?
I will. Yep. Okay, over when we're gonna work on our forecasting, we're gonna look out for 7 years. We're gonna do inflation. We're gonna add inflationary increases for the salary and maintenance. We're gonna have to add in some new full-time employees. We're gonna look at our fleet equipment replacement, some larger CIPs that are coming in, and then our pavement preservation program. On the expenditures line items, those percent increases are very similar to percent increases we've presented in the past, and really match up with what we did on the solid waste annual increases. We are adding the potential for 2 new full-time employees, one in fiscal year 25, which is next fiscal year, and then one in 2027. The one in 2027 will actually be split duties between streets and traffic signs and signals. As our streets grow, we see a need to have a little more support in our traffic signs and signals area. If we shift down to our capital outlays, as we grow, we see a need for equipment housing and structures and tanks in the outer areas of town. So we did put in monies to build structures to house our equipment and places to put materials to be able to perform more efficiently. During the summer times, traveling and during the winter times, traveling from Silverbrook down to the city shop complex sometimes takes up to 45 minutes. So there's a lot of traveling that we do just because of how we're laid out. So we're looking at satellite areas. And with Silverbrook, I know that there's some reservation properties for to house some street equipment. So we need to build just some shelter to park some of our street equipment up there, which will be nice during winter operations, so we don't have to road something up to Silverbrook on a daily basis. We can actually house it in the Silverbrook area, which supports not only Silverbrook, but Tronstead, Rose Crossing, Eagle Valley Branch, North Town Center. So it hits all that area. So that's what those monies are there for. We also need to do some capital improvements for our traffic controls and signal updates for our systems on Meridian. So 3 Mile Drive needs to be updated, Meridian and 3 Mile Drive, and then the other signals there on Liberty and 2 Mile. So just anticipate some improvements that we need to do for those signals. What we're looking at here is a list of our equipment replacement schedules over the next 10 years. I did plan this out for the next 10 years. The costs that we're looking at are present values. So these are 2023 costs. I didn't inflate the costs as we went forward. It's really actually quite difficult to do. And that's kind of just where I left it at this time. So our equipment replacement schedules are based off of an equipment's typical life expectancy. Like our large dump trucks, we are utilizing them for 20 years, and usually it takes us 2 years to replace them. So as the mayor noted, we're extending the life out of our large pieces of equipment as long as we can. Our sweepers, they have a 15-year life expectancy. They just have a lot of moving parts, and after 15 years, they really face a lot of mechanical issues as a part of that. But actually, for sweepers, it's actually recommended you replace them every 10 years, but we push them now to about 15 years. And the cost to replace the sweepers are split between streets and stormwater fund. We have been really fortunate in not have to purchase sweepers. The Mackey grant used to be really active, and we were able to get our sweepers purchased through the Mackey grant, and we had to pay like 12%-ish of that total cost. So that Mackey grant, it's just not very active at this time, and so we did plan to do sweeper replacements in the upcoming years. For our equipment replacements, we allocate $200,000 a year for equipment replacement. And as you can see, when you kind of overlay what the replacement schedule is and the amount of monies we put towards it, we just come up a little short. So we've been pushing items quite a bit because of that. But if you look at what we have anticipated coming up in this year, I talked about a new plow truck coming in, and the cost of that is $250,000. When you sum up everything that we need to replace for streets, they're pretty significant costs. And then for TSS, there's the sum, and then we have a grand total of equipment replacement cost for that entire fund. And really, we're just bumping up against some equipment inflation. Back in 2013, when we actually went through the budget and we allocated $200,000, we might have been a little bit underfunded for equipment replacement, but now we're significantly underfunded for equipment replacement. It's just hard to keep up with the inflation for those costs at this time. So This slide, what I did is I took those totals for streets and TSS. We summarized that as a grand total for all of them. And then what I did is I looked at smoothing it out a little bit. I knew that the fund just couldn't handle straight up purchasing everything out. So we needed to acquire some debt on our larger pieces of equipment as they came in for replacement. So when we went through that exercise, really we come up to the budget kind of grand total of what we really need for our capital equipment replacements. And that comes to about $750,000 a year when you consider everything as a part of that. So this is the number that I did put into our projections when we move on to the next slides.
Is that
Nope.
5-year life on the loan is the normal,
Yeah,
and then
for
the
equipment.
6% rate's the current rate?
Yeah, I talked to Amy Cook about what percentage we should do, and it typically is ranging between 5 and 6. I use 6% on these cost estimates, but she did tell me that she thought they might be going down.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really, when you're doing over a 10-year, it's really hard
Yeah.
to, get the exact inflation.
Mm-hmm.
So I did 6. I actually originally had 5, and she said, no, do 6. And then she come back and said, oh, wait, maybe they'll go down. So I just left it at 6.
Yep.
Okay. This is actually our last slide of this really long presentation I have for you before we get into some really good discussions. This sheet pretty much brings everything together on a one-page budget summary. And it should look really familiar to our budget pages. Essentially, we've got our ending cash, which we always carry over to our beginning cash. So we're starting to look at fiscal year 25 now. We're bringing in our revenues, which I grew at a 1% rate across the board. We always allocate $450,000 to pavement preservation, $200 towards our equipment replacement. And then we go down to our expenditures. So our expenditures take into account our salaries, M&O, and our capital. In this line item, and then we break it out to our equipment expenditures. So as I explained in the previous slide, these are our equipment expenditures. And then if we stay on equipment for a second, you'll see that we are definitely underfunded in equipment replacement. And really that's because we've got about $166,000 to carry over from fiscal year 23. You add 200 to that and it's just not going to cover that difference. So that's why you're seeing that in the red. If we don't do an assessment increase, you'll never see us go in the red because we won't purchase those pieces of equipment.
Right.
Obviously, right? Okay, so then if we focus on our pavement preservations, we bring in $450. We will always try to spend our $450 each year in our pavement preservation program. But when I'm just doing simple Excel spreadsheet calculations, I spend the $450 and I have the carryover. That number always changes throughout every year. It's just, but we will never spend more than $450 because our budget doesn't allow us to. So that's kind of why those stay level. So going back up to expenditures for our M&O salaries and capital, we're coming down. What we look at is our reserves, our 50% of our operating. And what we'll see here is we start to kind of dive down and not be able to meet that financial policy in fiscal year 27. And that's because we're utilizing these reserves now in the costs as we start to take into consideration the outer years. So ultimately what that means for us, we're underfunded in capital equipment replacement. Fiscal year 27, we're not going to be able to meet those reserves. So you'll see us pulling back quite a bit on all things and all levels of services. We won't be able to bring on new personnel to help support us in those outer for our plowing operations and our other operations that need extra personnel. We won't be able to do any facility additions. We just don't have the funding to do that at this time. And then ultimately, it's just going to lower our level of services that we're able to provide as we move forward. So, are there any questions? Because this is actually my last slide in summary of everything.
So at the end of 10 years, we're basically $8 million short.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
6
cumulative.
plus half of your operating
Yeah,
round numbers.
yep.
Seen this before. Not quite that big.
Yeah, and we're happy to continue and answer any questions tonight, as much as council wants. Really, again, we're in the midst of budget discussions here, and, it's a lot of stuff to consider. So, yeah, obviously we don't expect any type of decision tonight. And in fact, excuse me, where I think it's been really effective is in, starting off with just this base and then coming back with, okay, yeah, and Susie already gave really the one example of, okay, if we do nothing, we're just going to pull back. And that's always an option. It's not the recommended option, especially in pavement preservation, because you see that goes down. But then what are other options as it looks like in different levels, and what's that mean in terms of the fund, and how does that smooth it out? So that's kind of what we would anticipate coming back with, just to further that discussion, but give everyone a good solid base of knowledge on the department and on the fund and where we're at in there. So I think that's kind of how I envision this going forward, but obviously open to suggestions from council.
Good current snapshot.
Absolutely.
Counselor Dowd has a question, comment.
Hey, I think you might have just said this, but the next meeting we're going to have a recommendation section, correct? Are you going to give us like a option A, B, C kind of thing?
Yeah, well, we'll start working on some of that to see what it looks like. I remember, really good, vibrant discussions like on water rates, when we had, multiple options on that. So, I think that'd be the next logical step, is looking at some different options for council to consider and give feedback on, and look at that and then continue that discussion that way. I mean, we're still a good ways out from both the preliminary and obviously the final budget, and doing any type of assessment review component through there. So I think that'd probably be the best way to go. But, if it has to start with a presentation like this, just to give that good foundation of everything that goes into the department. And here, I mean, getting a presentation like this, I appreciate the work that Susie and Terry and Jean and Clint have done in putting this together, because it gives a really good insight into everything that goes into these operations. And I think that next step is, okay, what are those different options, and what's it actually look like into the future?
If I understood it from the slides, 2018 was the last time this budget was raised?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
And that was part of a 2013 resolution, I believe, that lasted.
Or 14, it was right in there, yeah.
somewhere.
I think the increase happened 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18.
Okay.
So it hasn't been adjusted since the 25% inflation got added on.
Oh,
Yeah, so the last time the last time it was acted on was in that 13 or 14, with the final adjustment occurring in the 18 timeframe. But in terms of going back and revisiting it, and as Susie pointed out, we talked a little bit about it last year, going, hey, this is going to come up this upcoming year because we're experiencing those.
Appreciate it. So the last time this was addressed, it was kind of a step up over 4 or 5 years.
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. Thanks. That's all my questions.
I think, Sid, one of the things that you're looking at, you kind of commented on, this hasn't been adjusted since 2018, and you said 25% inflation, and that's really since 2020. So there are a couple of years of additional inflation in there, but we look at, just with normal inflation in our household budgets, doesn't compare at all to what we're seeing inflation on the hard equipment, on rolling
No.
iron. It's extremely inflated.
Not to mention the cost of materials.
Correct. But it also shows you kind of that lagged effect of inflation and how it accumulates over time and then comes back and really hits home on a budget like this.
It does. Yep. I think as we further discussion, one of the things that I discussed with Doug too is I don't know if we do ourselves any favors when we stop our increases at one point. We, as we look at what the potential, we might have to do a bit of an increase to just catch us back up so we stay even. But if we were to continue that increase just in small doses each year, we wouldn't be where we're at today. So maybe we'll bring that back for discussion next time too.
And that is one thing that the council has enacted in a lot of our different components, is adding in that annual inflator tied to a CPI or something of that nature.
Yep.
And like I say, it's been really good for those different components and just keeping up, a little bit, even if, no matter what it is with that rate. And probably be wise to start thinking about that as we implement any component change.
Okay. Any other questions from Zoom land?
If I may, if I bring back options to review, is there anything particular anybody would like me to focus specifically on? I got a pretty good handle on the equipment and the new employees, but the pavement preservation level of services, is there like a?
Maybe on that, Susie, just one for our education and also for the public, is this is how many less miles we can do.
Okay,
Because people got used to seeing this amount, and now all of a sudden, well, we're doing less and less and less. Well, the dollar isn't going as far. And I guess if that rate continues, well, our job this year is a block.
yeah,
So
okay,
we can only hope that, and I've said it before, we don't want deflation.
right,
Because deflation's incredibly devastating to an economy. But catching up with this level of inflation, my concern is gonna be covering this on assessments to the taxpayer. Last I checked, wages didn't go up 25% since 2020. Other than for you, Mr. Russell, I think yours was up.
Tied to the average.
It wasn't
Tied to
quite
the
that much,
average.
that's right, no. None of us have seen that kind of an increase. So this is one of those things where time and money solve all things.
yeah,
And when you start running tight on money, time is what has to stretch out. So, and adjusting those, as you said, Mr. Russell, adjusting those expectations on service levels.
Well, it's all part of the discussion. And they're all valid discussion points.
Just like the smaller ice cream container for the president, now we will do chip and mill and overlay on 2/3 of the road.
I've never heard that comparison
We're
before,
just
but
gonna
yeah,
do-
sure.
Yeah,
10 feet center lane
that's right.
in the middle,
And we'll be accused of doing shrinkflation.
yeah, okay.
Okay. So clear what you got to do?
Clear as mud, Your Honor.
Got it. Awesome. We'll get through the other end.
Okay.
All right. Any public comment this evening on this or any other items? Go ahead and step up to the microphone, sir. Just give us your name and
My name is Jaden Weppel. I live at 1122 4th Street West in Kalispell. I think it's in Ward 3. I am the current chairman for the Flathead County Transportation Advisory Committee that oversees Mountain Climber, the bus service here in Flathead County. As you may know, about 3/4 of Mountain Climbers' operations or services occur within the city of Kalispell. And we currently have some openings on our board. I just wanted to be here tonight to invite any counselors who may be interested. It would be, I think, of great benefit both to the city of Kalispell and to Mountain Climber as a whole to have the input of one of Kalispell City's counselors there. If anyone has any interest in that, we have or are hesitant about it and just want to see you, we have our next public meeting. I believe that's April 4th. Or if you would like, come again.
what day was that again?
Thursday, April 4th.
Okay.
That's at 2 p.m. in the South County Building, just above the Agency on Aging. And if anyone would like to apply, you can either send a letter directly to the commissioners, or you can send an email to Dory Mager, and I can provide that email address if that is, if anyone has any interest in that.
Okay, great,
And that's all I've got to say.
great.
Just-
Appreciate it.
Just curious real quick, how many positions do you have open on your board?
I believe there are currently 4 open positions. We're also hoping to reach out to the city of Columbia Falls. And I believe there is already someone from the city of Whitefishes, not the council, but a member of their public works that is on that commission or committee.
All right,
Okay,
thank you.
great.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Any other, no? Mr. Russell, do you have anything?
Yeah, just a couple items. Next week, we're meeting on Tuesday, because Monday's a holiday. Just a couple items on that agenda. We anticipate a resolution for the next phase of the bypass, the southern bypass. The state's looking to complete that out and working with us again on a raise grant application. So it's been an effective manner to go after those funds. So looking at that, also finish off the public hearing and look at a resolution on the slip of funds for repair and maintenance of infrastructure. 26th work session, likely to be coming back to have more discussion on solid waste. And then just looking out for people's planning purposes, probably will not have a work session on March 11th, as we will have National League of Cities and a meeting with some of our federal delegations in DC on that, for that annual component. So probably no need to have a work session on there with some of us gone for that. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Anything from council?
Well, I would just like to echo along with what Mr. Whipple said. I think there is a lot of volunteer organizations and boards out there within the county, and I think even potentially some on the city that we have not filled. So certainly encourage anybody that wants to volunteer to help make our community better to stand up and make your voice heard and get involved. So thank you.
Okay. Anything from anyone online? Are we sure that was Sid? It didn't sound like Sid.
Because Sid's got a frog in his throat.
Okay, I think, let's see. Only question I have for council, Mr. Russell, maybe, I've had some comments about the landfill, how much room do we have? I've heard that out in the public a little bit, and I almost wonder if it would be good to have someone from the landfill operation come and present on one of the committee reports. That's not, because I am on that board. Would it qualify as a committee report? But actually kind of talk about the expansion plans, how much time we think we have there, and kind of what they do with the operations. It really is pretty interesting. Either that or a work session,
Sure. Yeah, we'll see if we can get someone.
because I think that would be interesting as we're talking about solid waste. That's not part of our bill, but it's where it goes. So I think that would be interesting. And then I think, other than side commentary on all kinds of fun stuff going on the national level and the pugilistic activities within the Montana GOP as everyone fights for a spot in the House, more of the same. So, and I guess as we see, you can hit someone and commit a crime and still get elected.